Good morning, and I'm excited to be here at First Developer Days. My name is Josh Morris, and I'll be joined shortly here on stage by Kirby Fitch. And together, Kirby and I are part of the product management team here at SailPoint's Identity Security Cloud platform. And today we're going to talk to you about our API strategy. Our mission here with regard to APIs is to give you a return on your investment, to provide greater value from our software through extensibility. And we're going to do that by giving you a quicker time to value. And so some of the ways that we've done that recently would be examples like our new modern microservices architecture. We've given you event-driven architecture that is built on our v3 APIs. And through 2023, we're going to continue to expand that by as much as 3 times, if not more. And you're going to see more and more APIs available to you in our v3 format. Additionally, we've added an event-driven architecture that allows us to expose more event triggers. So these event triggers are going to allow you to be able to build out automatic workflows either outside of our application or using our own workflows tool. And so we're going to provide in 2023 even more workflows available to you, and you're going to see those grow again by as many as 3 times what we have today. On top of those 2 things, we have some new features that we're rolling out, some things that you've seen Colin use today, including our API scoping and our configuration hub. API scoping allows you to place limits onto personal access tokens, limiting their scope. And we're going to roll out through 2023 more availability to the APIs that you can scope and the types of scopes you can place on those APIs. Additionally, from our configuration hub, we have the ability today to be able to back up and restore those configuration for core objects. And we're going to increase the number of core objects that you can have via that process. And we're also going to add new use cases to that process so that you have the ability to expand into a promotion use case to be able to take items from a sandbox environment into a live production environment from that perspective. But today's session, I'm going to focus on a few key items that we have rolling out right now that will impact our developer community. Make sure that you're aware of these items, and then we can carry this conversation into the chat and Discord. The 3 items are our beta to v3 API promotion. I'm going to go into details on where we're at with that process. The deprecation of our non-public APIs, an announcement that we've recently made. And then finally, I'm going to have Kirby Fitch join me here on stage to talk through some changes to some key backend processes driven by updates to our event-driven architecture. So let's talk a little bit about our beta to v3 API promotion. We have a growing number of beta APIs that are sitting there in that library, and we need to get those moved over into production. So what you're going to see over the coming months is right now we're in the process of reviewing all of those APIs, taking those that are stable and moving them into v3. So you're going to see a huge growth of those beta APIs becoming v3 APIs here in the near future. And then as we get better at that lifecycle and we mature that process, then what you're going to see is we want to be able to provide you with some more explicit instruction on what to expect with the use of our APIs, the beta versus API promotion process. And through that, you'll get things like, we really want our beta APIs to be non-production use, to use to gather feedback through the promotion process prior to those APIs going live. And then for our production APIs, the existing contract will remain with no breaking changes, a longer end of life timeline for deprecation, and so forth. Now let's talk a little bit about our deprecation of non-APIs. So this is an announcement again that we made within the last couple of weeks, and there is a lot more detail than I'll be able to cover today available out on developer.sailpoint.com. So I really encourage you to go there for the FAQ on the developer forum. Why are we doing this? Well, these legacy APIs lack some of the features and controls that you would expect in a modern API library. And so we want to make sure that we are adding those, and we do that through our v3 format. So by getting as many people to move to our v3 format as quickly as possible, then we can take advantage of some of those components. When we talk about non-public APIs, how do you know which APIs we're talking about? The easiest way to know that today would be our non-public APIs are any of those that do not start with a v3 or beta. v3 or beta are our most current API libraries. Any of those that are prior to that are what we're talking about from a deprecation perspective. And finally, what do we mean by deprecation? Well, in our process, deprecation means we're marking that API as obsolete, which starts the clock on the end of life for that API. So what do you need to know? Well, first off, I would say that our announcement so far is to let you know that we want you to be notified that we have a plan to begin deprecating these APIs. That is what we've released at this point, is just an information to kind of let you know that this is coming. We have created a category on the developer forum where we're going to post individual APIs as they become deprecated. So when an API has a replacement and is ready to be deprecated, then you will see those V1 and V2 APIs posted on that channel in the developer forum. I suggest that you subscribe to that list. Make sure that you are part of that category so that you're notified automatically of changes as new APIs get added to that list. Now, we're doing this in two main waves. There is a first priority, our first generation APIs, and then a second priority. Those first priority APIs, we have a need to be able to deprecate those by the end of this year. That's December 31st, 2023. And those APIs are those that start with a /cc or a /API. And so those are our first priority, and we're working quickly to create all those V3 endpoints to get those posted for you. If you're looking out there on the channel right now and you're not seeing one of the APIs that interest you, it could be the fact that we're not there just yet and that we haven't created that API at this point. So you will see that added to the list as soon as we can get that created. The second priority of APIs will be those that are the V2 APIs. These V2 APIs will have a 12-month end-of-life process from when they get posted as deprecated on the site. So you'll have a 12-month period to be able to move off of those APIs and start to use the new V3 APIs. So I know there's lots of questions around this process. We've been answering some of them already this morning. And so I want you to continue this conversation with me in the Discord chat. And I'll be jumping in there to be able to keep on talking about this and answer any specific questions that you may have. What I'd like to do at this point is go ahead and invite up Kirby Fitch and have Kirby Fitch talk to us about some of the back-end processes that we're working on and how those changes from an event-driven architecture are allowing us to make some key changes to those processes that you can take advantage of from a development perspective. Kirby, come on up.
Thank you, Josh. Hey, everybody. I'm Kirby Fitch, Senior Product Manager here at SailPoint for identities and identity processing, as well as aggregations, provisioning, attribute sync, and unofficially, creator of endpoints, I suppose would be another title of mine. So today, I've been brought on stage to talk about back-end processes. More specifically, we're going to talk about attribute sync. I suspect at the end of this, you may want to double-click on some of the things I've had to say here. So in that regard, I do want you to know that at documentation.sailpoint.com, we've got absolutely thorough documentation on attribute sync. Additionally, what we're going to be talking about here is a culmination of a number of major releases that have made attribute sync real time. You could go to the SaaS updates section on Compass to be able to track each one of the announcements for the major releases we made with attribute sync in the past year. For each one of those major releases, we did a high-level introduction, use cases, expected use, Q&A, and then really importantly, also put forward a short form for you to be able to pass along feedback, which comes directly to me, which I do read. Additionally, if you'd like to do something a little bit more long form, there is a link to my calendar where you can set up time to talk with me about things that we've released in the past, as well as things that are forthcoming. I really do just frankly appreciate the time that you spend with me on these types of calls. We do use them to inform our decisions and make real product decisions based on them. So without further ado, let's start talking about real-time attribute sync. There are really two sections here. The first bit is educational. We're going to inform you about the way real-time attribute sync works. Second up, we're going to talk about the retirement of the job-based attribute sync, the form of attribute sync that came before real-time attribute sync. So if the slide hasn't already made it clear, we have delivered real-time attribute sync to 100% of production tenants just a couple weeks ago. It wasn't all done in a single release, it was actually done in a series of releases. But what you should take away from this is that when there is a need for attribute sync in your tenant, it is now happening in real time. As far as what real-time attribute sync means to us, there are three big use cases here. The first one is self-service sync. So whether you're an administrator in the UI, pressing a button that says sync, or whether you're a developer working with our endpoints, pressing that sync via code, you are now able to initiate a sync for a source or for an individual identity whenever needed, as opposed to the before state, which was that we were syncing once per day at 8 a.m. in your tenant's local time each day. Second, syncing identity changes. So when we aggregate from your authoritative source, I'll use Workday in our examples, we are going to detect an identity change and we're going to make syncs right away, as opposed to happening each day at 8 a.m. in your tenant's local time. Lastly, overwriting account changes, or the native change detection use case. When you aggregate a target source, for the examples, I'll use Active Directory. We might be syncing Workday to Active Directory. We'll also be watching for account events coming out of your target sources to see if anybody has made any changes for things that are actually supposed to be governed by your attribute sync configuration. We'll be then overwriting right away rather than doing that each morning. So with each of these three, we're starting to see less of a need for that 8 a.m. attribute sync. Diving in, what do we mean by self-service sync? First, I've given you a little endpoint right up there, synchronize attributes. That is what powers this sync button in the attribute sync UI. The UI that we're looking at here is a source, Active Directory, which is our target. You can go to the Accounts tab and then to the Attribute Sync sub-tab, and you see on the left hand in this table the identity attribute. Those are the identity attributes that are being synced to the account attributes, which are on the right side under account attributes. So you see here we're syncing display name to display name, work email to mail, and so on. When you come into this menu for the first time, everything will be unchecked, which means we'll not be syncing it through automation. So when you first set that up, you go ahead and check the ones that we want to sync. In this case, we've checked all of them except for one. You save your configuration. Prior to this release, there was no sync button. Then you saved, and you had to wait until 8 a.m. for your sync to be applied. Now, when you're ready, you go ahead and press the sync button, and we'll push those syncs to all 339 accounts on this source here. Second, syncing identity changes. IdentityNow syncs identity changes down to accounts. Really important is that the identity always wins. Don't forget that. So let's say that we aggregate Workday and we detect an identity attribute change has come through. This identity that we're working with has gotten a new title of Product Manager. So what we're going to do is we're going to find out where that title maps to in the target system Active Directory. And we're going to find out, oh, this identity, this account down in Active Directory, his job title there was actually astronaut. He's not an astronaut, he's a product manager. So we're going to go ahead and sync product manager down to the target system. Third, overwriting account changes. IdentityNow overwrites changes to governed account attributes. Remember, again, the identity always wins. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and aggregate the target system Active Directory. And we're going to find out that the Active Directory administrator, for whatever reason, has found this identity, has found their account, and changed their title to Professional Food Critic. That sounds like a really great job title. I'd love to have it. But actually, when IdentityNow consults my identity, it says, hey, this guy's job title is actually Product Manager. Because the identity always wins, and because we found a mismatch, we are going to resync the job title of Product Manager over Professional Food Critic, and the identity account will end up in the same state as the identity. So with these three things, the ability to self-service sync, the ability to sync after an identity changes, and the ability to sync after an account changes, the 8 a.m. attribute sync job is now obsolete. So we're going to deep dive a little bit on what else this 8 a.m. job is doing. Attribute sync is just a part of that. We're going to talk about some considerations for retiring the job, and then we're going to get you out of here. Like I said, we're retiring the 8 a.m. attribute sync job. The job is part of scheduled processing that happens at 8 a.m. each day. Some of you might know that as refresh. We are rebranding that terminology to scheduled processing. You can find this at documentation.salepoint.com. There's 3 things that we're doing here in the scheduled processing in the morning, is that we're checking lifecycle states. So that's your time-based attributes. We might be looking at hire dates, termination dates, and so on to inform the lifecycle state that the identity is in. So if you are before your hire date, you might be in a pre-hire state. If you are between your hire date and your termination date, you might be in an active state. If you're after your termination date, you might be in a terminated state. What we're doing each day is saying, hey, today is this date. What is this person's hire date? What is this termination date? What state should we put them in? If they change their states, we're going to update their lifecycle state axis. We're going to enable accounts, disable accounts, throw them into new access profiles. And then lastly, we do the sync attribute job for that identity. What we're going to be doing here is trimming the sync attribute job out, but leaving the rest for now. This is going to give you admins a bit more flexibility. We're going to cut down the time that this overall process takes to run by about 30%, which means that 30% less time will refresh be running in the morning, which means that there's a couple things that you can't do while it's running, such as deleting a source and some identity editing operations. You'll now be freed up to do more things for longer. And by the way, another helpful thing that we're doing here is that when we do all of our syncs at one time, compressed in an hour window each morning, all those syncs head to the provisioning queue to be fulfilled. And meanwhile, your end users are logging in for the day and they're starting to put in access requests, password changes, and so on. And now we've got access requests, password changes, and syncs all kind of competing for the same limited resources. By not doing all this work in the morning and instead spreading it out through the day when you aggregate your sources, your end users will benefit as well. They'll see their access requests, password changes, provision faster is the idea. Now, for the limited trade-off we have here is that you as an administrative team will be responsible for discovering and correcting errors. You always have. IdentityNow has just helped you along a little bit more by doing some, frankly, a little bit of overambitious checking each morning. So if you head back to the Attribute Sync UI, what you will see is a View Events link. This is going to take you to search. It's going to show you all the attribute syncs we fulfilled. It's also going to show you all the attribute syncs that ended in error. You're going to want to keep an eye on this and then be able to troubleshoot the root cause of each one of them. Some examples might be, maybe a source is unavailable, so every sync to it errors. Maybe you're trying to sync a string value to a number and it errors out because of that. Or maybe we've actually got some false successes, which could be maybe due to a transform or a rule that you're using. We continually sync an uppercase value of email to a target system. The target system only takes email in lowercase, so it lowercases it. We aggregate, we think it's different, we sync it back, and it happens in a loop. We call that cyclical provisioning. These are all the kinds of things that you're going to be wanting to watch out for. Instead of retrying errors each morning, we're going to basically try them 3 times and then stop in this new event-driven architecture. So want you to know as a developer that you can use a search report to find the string for the search string for the source of interest. You could copy that, paste that out into your code, and then you could even do some automated checking for errors or maybe too many successes, which could be concerning as well, external to the system. Now, if you have resolved all the issues with a source, you can also then rest assured that you fixed that and then use the sync button to retry the sync for all 339 accounts and make sure that everybody's in sync the way you need it to be. So the takeaway here is that admins and developers should use search to find errors and sync when needed. And as a trade-off, we're not going to be retrying those each morning and kind of filling up on work that's not really needed. Third, disable scheduled processing. So, like I said, we're taking away the sync attributes portion of the scheduled processing task. This is next. This is a little further out than us getting rid of just the attribute sync job. You should start thinking about if you need the scheduled processing at all and in what regard. Scheduled processing actually happens twice a day, once in the morning at 8 a.m., once again at 8 p.m. It only does the attribute sync portion at 8 a.m., but it does do the lifecycle state check at both 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. First, ask yourself, am I checking lifecycle states through inference of hire dates, termination dates, and so on? Some tenants actually load this value straight away from Workday. They might just say, hey, this Workday is in this state. They're not trying to figure that out based on start date or end date. If you're doing something like that, you don't need to check lifecycle states at all. This is actually just work that doesn't need to happen. If you are checking based on time-based attributes, start dates and end dates and so on, then you need to ask yourself, how often do I need this to happen? Do I need it to happen at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m.? Actually, we've talked to a good number of clients, customers, and 8 p.m. is just good enough to do that check once per day. So the takeaway here should be that you're starting to think about this. When do I really need scheduled processing to run? Do I need it both times a day? Do I need it one time a day? Do I need it no time a day? In the relatively near future here, we're going to put this choice in your hand. And we're going to tell you a bit more about this at about the same time that we tell you that we've turned off the job-based portion of sync attributes. This is all happening in the coming months, give or take. So with that, I thank you. And because I have a little bit of extra time, and because you've been asking about it in the chat, I wanted to make a little bonus announcement here that you might have seen in Colin's presentation that there is a new identity list UI forthcoming. Along with that, we're actually going to be publishing some new endpoints. The ones that I have on my internal roadmap are delete, disable, identity list, and identity get. Those are going to be coming not too long after you actually receive the identity list. And honestly, just looking forward to talking with you in chat, figuring out if you have any more needs in that area, and sincerely thank you for your time and attention today.